Hola, YouTube. Have you ever had a game series that you kinda liked but isn't that big? Probably an indie game or one by a small developer. For me, Momodora is one of those series. I think I saw a video about it, and it was just before 4 released originally. So with the first 2 games being free downloads, it was easy to just get them to try. 3's only $2, and all of them made me interested in playing 4. Now, with 5 out, being fully realized, I thought, hey, let's go back and reacquaint myself with the series. The Momodora series is, well, it's a lot of things, but at their core, all of them are 2D action platformers. From being a small indie game made mostly by Radine, it slowly turned into a multi-person team in the name of Bomb Service. I think the strongest quality of the games that stuck out to me the most was the evolution of the game's design, each one bringing their own unique flavor for soon-to-be obvious reasons. That being said, if you already know everything you need to know about Momodora and you just want to hear me talk about the 5th game, Moonlit Farewell, here's a timestamp to get you right there, and it wraps up all of my thoughts on the previous games, moving forward into that one. So, the original Momodora. You play as a young girl from the land of Koho. Sacrifices are made in hopes to reincarnate the world into a better place, but that left our heroine Isadora Doralina an orphan without a mother. She's heard about this sacred item that is in the Forbidden Land. It's said that this item can even bring people back to life, but for a price. But no price is too high for the chance to bring her mother back. This is a small game, so that's most of the story you're getting right there. Momodora is a pretty basic 2D action platformer. You have a magical leaf and enemies to cut them down with, until you get a gun. And if you've been looking, Momodora is very reminiscent of Cave's story in movement, environment, and basic weapons other than the leaf. But it's also reminiscent of older Nintendo games on their platform like Mega Man and Zelda. The platforming in this game is simple enough, it's just the enemies that you really have to watch out for. The ones running around and flying around aimlessly are fine, it's the guys that are perfectly placed that you have to watch out for. The guys who shoot you when you enter a room with projectiles that go through walls that will annoy you. Even early on, you notice the type of game this is with these types of enemies and the falling hazards that punish in action. It's a game of patience, decisive action, and knowledge. You could say this game is leveled base, as each save point designates a new area, but if you felt like it, you could go backwards. In fact, there are a handful of split paths that get you collectible items that lead you to dead ends. It's just the same that those items don't do anything. Bragging rights for sure, but not worth it. Guns aren't your only upgrades, you get sub-weapons like a boomerang that goes through walls and activates switches, a shield that could have been a little better, it blocks projectiles and does damage but it can't kill in a single hit, so that enemy coming straight for you isn't going to stop, but if you need to run through an area full of projectiles it's useful. It's just swapping through weapons is a bit of a bother, and the guns you do get mostly outclass each other, meaning you're swapping through a bunch of useless nonsense most of the time. Seeing how if you played this game perfectly, it would only last around 10 to 15 minutes, it stretches itself out with difficulty, small visual tricks, enemy ambushes, you name it. It's just that I wish this game didn't send you back to the start screen each time. You will die a lot. It will get annoying. The thing I find the most odd though is that the final boss is really easy compared to the rest of the game. You get moves that are easy to dodge, plus a Zelda-like tennis match, then a second phase final form that's only hard to deal with if you go to the wrong side of the screen. But what do you get for defeating the Underworld Queen who just so happens to live here for no specific reason and has a leaf just like Dora? Nothing. We see our mother who tells us that she's glad that we tried so hard, but the god's will can't be undone, and the sacrifice must stay and teleports us back to the entrance. So, we did all of this for nothing. Do you guys like downer endings? Because this can't even be classified as bittersweet. Momodora is a pretty well held together game and wears its homages well enough. Too bad I don't particularly care for them. This type of platforming, this type of shooting, these enemies, no thanks. Its saving grace is that this game is free and short, but there's nothing that it does particularly bad either. It's all a matter of preference, and with that, let's go on to something more my speed. In Momodora 2, you play as the young priestess Momo Renal, who has been tasked with taking out another underworld queen. The sudden appearance has caused problems in the land. Her sister says as much to get you familiar with the plot, and as we move forward, we run into said underworld queen herself. We're not even good enough to be her enemy. So with nothing left to do, we move forward. Momodora 2 is a full-fledged Metroid,
don't say Vania,
Metroid-like video game, a fully connected map that circles around itself, and once again our main weapon is the Leaf Blade, this time in a nice coat of red. As we move around the map, we find our next weapon, which is a projectile talisman, and that's it in terms of attacking. No more guns. This restricted but focused approach is more my style. No more weapon swapping. While our main objective is to beat the boss, how we do so is loosely expressed in the game's UI. You have these sparkles and 4 bars to fill up by praying to statues of past priestesses. What do they mean? That's for later. As we make our way through the map, we run into NPCs who slightly flesh out the world. Girls from different lands come to investigate the shrine because they have also been affected by the revival of the Underworld Queen. One of them is even a princess, out to find the power to help her people. She's the only other boss in this game that we face, so get used to her. We gain power-ups like the Wave Beam, Talisman, and a dash that works on the ground and in the air, and if you pay very close attention to your map and remember that your dash can break through special blocks, you can even find a green magical leaf like the one Isadora had. Sooner or later you'll find all of the prayer statues and make your way to the blocked entrance to the Netherworld. Good thing we prayed before we got here. Make your way through some familiar yet still annoying enemies and you'll be face to face with the Underworld Queen herself, who after a very intense battle we find out to be a corrupted Isadora. Luckily we found the green leaf, so we're able to purify her of her curse. If you didn't get the leaf, you get the bad ending. She dies. 2 stronger focus on close range combat is something I prefer. The talismans allow for range when you need them, but being able to do both easily is a great improvement. The map is also fantastic with the way it weaves in on itself. Each area circles you around to somewhere close to where you need to go to next, with each new upgrade playing into a hint on where to go. The extra characters add some actual world building unlike the items in the first game, which I think were most just funny jokes and references. But for a game you can beat in about 20 minutes, it's enough to satisfy me. And speaking of games you can beat in 20 minutes, Momodora 3 takes a step back in the level design department but expands on its other gameplay aspects. As for the story, bad things are happening and Momo and Dora have to stop them. Gone is the Metroid-like map and we're back to a more straightforward adventure with the few branching paths like the first game. As for the combat, it's become more refined on the enemies' end. They have stronger tails so you know when they're about to attack. The smoother animation really did justice to the playstyle that they leaned into. This time though, you also have items that you can buy from a shop or find out in the field and give you extra abilities. Mostly passive buffs, conditional activations, from a ring that doubles your defense to items that modify your throw charms to giving you an attack boost at low damage. Man, do you become the glassiest of cannons, and I love it. Other than that, there's now a difficulty mode. It modifies your amount of health, starting items, and the location of a few pickups in the game. It's so straightforward that there's not much to talk about. There's a bit more superfluous things in this game, like the NPCs you run into. They all feel a bit more like functions than the last game, but it's hard to call that an outright bad thing either. You have 2 characters that you naturally run into, Marielle and Meliot. Marielle is on this quest to find her siblings, but as you go through the game, she becomes this benchmarker to see how fast you can speedrun it. If you don't get to her final spot before a certain time, you'll find her dead, but the bit about finding her siblings goes nowhere even if you do. Oh, and there's also a new Game Plus feature, which carries over your time, so you're definitely gonna find her dead that time. It's Meliot is from Kars, the place mentioned in the second game, but she's only useful for giving you an item to fight the secret boss. There's a lot to unpack in that secret boss too, from meeting one of the priestesses who was a statue in the last game, to questioning why their prayers seem to be connected to the curse. But that's in a secret boss area. I'm not a fan of storytelling like that. Momodora is still figuring out how to handle itself with its 3rd installment, but now everything can come together. Momodora Reverie Under the Moonlight could be called Momodora in its completed form. The somber story from 1, the open-ended map from 2, and the refined combat and abilities from 3 are all here. A curse is crossing the living world with the undead, and it's up to the Lun priestess Kaho to get to the land of Kars to investigate its origins and cause. This is technically the same kind of curse from 3, but you get to see it this time and isn't caused by the queen of the undead who lives in hell, whose lol so random even evil this time for funsies. If you've noticed, Momo 4 is a prequel that follows the secret character we met in the last game and the statue in 2. We also see the city of Kars that those girls kept coming from, even if it's in the past and dying. In terms of gameplay, as stated, Momo 4 is the culmination of everything that's come before. The sprites have been sized up, so movement and animations have become even more fluid, but also more calculated. You have a 3-hit combo that carries you forward, so you have to be a little careful with how you move. Enemies can stagger, however, so most of the time it just feels fine and it feels extra good to hit them. This time, instead of talismans, Kaho carries a bow and arrow. What's the difference? It has its own dedicated button. There's this new dodge roll mechanic that reminds me of another game, but more importantly the air dash is brought back, and it also has invincibility frames just like the roll. The serious difficulty is still intact. You'll be feeling it even in the first area, but the return of difficulty settings means you can play at your own pace, but even on normal, damage will sneak up on you. Luckily, this game gives you an active healing item. That animation is also familiar. Anyway, the first boss gives you a good idea at what you're in for. Trust me, it's hard the first time, I promise. This is still a game that wants you to be patient, decisive, and to learn from your mistakes. Good thing is that there's not much touch damage in this game. Much is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. And if you beat a boss without taking damage, you even get a free item. The shop returns from 3 and you can even get some of these items from them, but being free can't be beat. The combination of active and passive abilities also gives this game a bit of a personal touch on how you want to play it, even if most of the active items are AoE attacks and the passive ones you'd actually want to use are regulated to your bow and arrow. But it's once you've entered the city for real that things start coming together. More bosses, actual branching pathways to tackle areas in any order, but still loop around in smart ways like Momodora 2. Mandatory upgrades that flesh out your abilities, like giving you a stronger charge shot, turning you into a kitty cat, or letting you warp from save spots. When you get the cat form, go back to the forest, trust me. Also, why don't they let me warp to every save spot? This game is larger, more intricate, and packed full of more content than the games before it. It's full of secrets, a dour mood, and characters that give you perspective on the world around you. Man, this place really feels like... As for the story, for being a longer and more detailed game, 4 gives you just as much as the previous ones. There's a bit more tone, there's a bit more ambiance, and the characters that you meet in the world have a bit more to do, but they lack just as much substance. A ghost that finds the grave of its wife, a climactic boss fight with a character that just makes a sudden misunderstanding, and a betrayal that doesn't get to fully express itself in the sake of a secret boss fight. The only thing it really has over 3 is that those plot lines here at least get to end. Find bad person, beat them up. That is basically the plot of this game that is carried by its tone and its world design and its art. And that's enough for what it is. It's just, it feels like everything that we've been building up in the past 3 games have just went nowhere at the same time. Alright, Momodora is a great little game, fantastic, but I think it's about time I criticize the subjective problem I have with the series as a whole. Up to this point, I don't think the Momodora series has much of an identity of its own. You start off as a cave story fan project, and I think 2 and 3 are innocuous enough to not give me a feeling of, oh, I've been here before, but oh, I've played a game like that. So they get a pass, but 4 is right back to wearing its inspiration on its sleeves as blatantly as it can, and it's a bit of a shame that 4 is the most well known, and it's known as 2D waifu Dark Souls with giant titty lady, but that's also what it blatantly is, so I can't blame anyone for thinking that. Personally, I don't care for those games, but I get why it's an inspiration. The Momodora games are a contrast between cute characters delving deeper into an unsettling unknown, but that also means that I personally don't like the tone most of the time. I like the gameplay well enough, but not enough to make up for that, because the next game that they made, Minoria, which is a much more straightforward European Inquisition witch hunt-like game with pretty much the same gameplay and map design as this, I didn't play that. And when I look at the original alpha footage for Momodora 5, my heart didn't sink because it was in 3D, it sank because I saw the Dark Souls dodge roll fully realized in it. I thought that was gross. But all that leaves us with is the new release of Momodora Moonlit Farewell. To be honest, the only thing this game would have to do to please me is to get back to the plot points that I like and to not be set in some blimey London town. Good thing it does at least 3/4 of that. We open the game on an ominous ringing of a bell that beckons death and darkness. It's causing the demons to rampage, and Momo is already on the scene. Your moveset is slightly changed this time. Your 3-hit combo now comes with a finisher where you throw the leaf. Healing isn't item based anymore. You have MP meter where it costs 10 MP to heal. Put a pin in that later. A roll returns, but there's no longer an air dash. The bow has changed from having its own dedicated button to returning to holding up and pressing the attack button like in Momodora 2. That was until the game updated and you can change your key bindings. But the biggest change up front is the addition of a stamina meter. I was worried when I first saw this, but it's not as bad as I thought it would be. Let's use the first boss to talk about it. Dodging takes up stamina, so obviously without it, you can't do it. Second, when your bar is full, you'll fire off a powered up arrow shot that takes out most of your stamina. You'll have enough for one dodge. This is an obvious nerf to the dodge roll and the arrows in response to the last game because they were broken. But that's not a good enough why for most people, now is it? Let's think about it a little more. With limited dodge rolls, you'll be forced to deal with enemies' attacks way more than the last time. There will be a point where you'll have to watch what it's doing, even if you're sitting back and shooting arrows. And now using arrows forces you to disengage with your enemy even more than last time, where you just attacked them, charged up your charge shot, and absolutely decimated them and killed everyone in less than a minute. Whether you're far away or close up, you have to engage with your enemy more in this game, and I appreciate that, but I can see how it would bother some people in the way they want to play the game. Honestly, if bosses didn't drop MP refills about every third of their health bar, this game would probably be just as hard as 4, if not maybe even a little more than like endgame 4. But as we finish the boss, we crash down into the bottom of the chasm, only to be saved by our friend Dora. But she's not here, so we get caught up to speed by our other friend Cereza. Oh, also don't worry about like no touching the boss, it's just an achievement in this game, you don't get anything. So remember that whole no identity thing I was complaining about? This game goes out of its way to give you some of that by making you run through the whole town of Koho just to get you familiarized with the area. The amazing art does a really good job of giving this land that we've mostly heard about in the past 4 games its own mood. But after that we run into Cereza, who will be accompanying us for this expedition to the roots to figure out what's going on with the bell. She's also ready to introduce us to our equipable abilities in this game, the sigils. These are our buffs and usable items this time. We're back to more Momodora 3 approach in using abilities with limited slots that expand as you find them throughout the game. Abilities can range from passive ones like Wind Blast that does poor damage but still stuns enemies as if you hit them directly. It's really good. Conditional ones like the returning damage boost with low health, and active ones that use up MP like Magic Arrow Shot. Some people might not consider this truly active action, but I do because it uses up a resource. To be honest, it's mostly just passive buffs this time around. But another mechanic is the companion system. You have these little guys that follow you around the map that can do things like drop magic bits that restore your MP like I talked about with the bosses, find money for the sigils that you can buy from Cereza, or help you with attacking. It's too bad that the walking ones are kind of bad. They get stuck on geometry, and if you get between an enemy gate and them entering the area, they just can't help you. Oh, they're also just turned off for bosses, don't count on them in there. But now we're on to the map and world design of the game. Once again, it's an explorative open map design, but in my opinion it's more reminiscent to 2 than 4. Momo 4 had a bit of freedom to its design, but there's a stronger sense of commitment when moving around in Momodora 5. Momodora 4 made it very clear when you were entering a new area, but this time around you're forced down certain paths even within the same zone, and you'd have to circle back around to get back to where you were before. That being said, getting lost is hard when pulling up the map is as easy as a press of a button. It has its own legend on the side, so you know exactly what you're getting. But even though we're going through the depths, the world is still inhabited by many NPCs, like Meliod, who returns and this time is more of a lore master to the game. Momo doesn't seem to know what a gun is. I wonder if Dora can tell her about it. And speaking of Dora, she crashes down on a boss fight and helps us out in a nice fun little combo battle. Don't get used to this. But she does give us an upgrade to our normal kit, the Dash. It uses up stamina, but it does have a brief invincibility window at the start. Other than the sigils that give you a bunch of passive buffs, this is the most upgrades that you'll be getting in this game. Most of them are traversal based, only one's very situational, which is odd when I think about it. But they do make going back through these areas very comfortable, especially because of those very large drops you have to make. There's also some fun platforming challenges that you'll run into from time to time. But as we're running under the roots of the actual magical tree that gave us our main weapon, you might have noticed these question marks on the map. These are our item pickups for this game. It's funny how Momodora 3 is the odd sheet because 2 and 4 let you increase your health like a normal Metroid game. This time we can upgrade our health, magic, attack power, and even stamina recovery. But it's not just those things. There's cash deposits that are just nice to get. Maybe you'll find a sigil or a companion, like this cute cat. Wait, no, that's boss. That was weird. Or maybe there's like a small side quest like finding these lost fairies that go into fairyland, and when did we run into all of these dead bodies? There's that classic Momodora dread setting in. Also the horny. But that dread is still here, especially in the demon frontier. I hate it here. Good job, video game. In fact, it's here where we find the bell ringers themselves and beat them, but that's not going to solve our problems. As I've been glossing over this plot, the real problems are gods and them pissing about. But on a smaller note, once you get to the demon frontier, you could have had a bit more freedom if you chose to explore some more. You could find the boss in there, or you could head to the next area, the Ashen's Lands, to deal with the next plot point before you run into a wall after beating those bosses. The plot point there is that to get to the next area, you have to get a new ability. And to get that, you have to backtrack to previous areas that you technically could have gotten once you've gotten your wall jump that you get from the Fairy Queen. It's not a lot of sequence breaking, but it can save time, especially once you get to the Demon Frontier, because that's where you find the ability to warp back to other save points. Still not all of them, still could be better. So my small freedoms aside, what are you doing all of this for? It's for a powered up form called Lunar Attunement, and it's really good. So you run faster, you jump higher, you do more damage and more combos, and your stamina isn't affected by your actions anymore. Lunar Attunement turns your stamina meter into a countdown clock that can turn off at any time if you choose to. With that, that's pretty much your full kit for the game, so I think I'm just gonna stop my analysis there because, well, if I spoil something, let me actually talk about the story while I do it. So, talking about the story, things have been fleshed out way more than they've ever been. Our main characters actually speak in this game. It gives Momo and Dora a bit more personality, and it helps with talking to Cereza because there's a friendship mechanic that betters her sigils that you can buy. But all of this doesn't really make the storytelling deeper or richer. The story is simple, cliched, has a bit of a tonal whiplash and contrast, but that's just Momodora being Momodora. Momo is your basic, determined main character who never gives up and wants to look on the brighter side of things. And that's fine for what it is, it's just that the storytelling overall is pretty basic with some strong visual overtones and okay execution. And this is the part where I kind of spoil things for the previous games because I'm going to talk over the series storytelling as a whole, because the thing that I really enjoy about it, other than the gameplay, is the character story premise. Momo 1 is about a girl going to a forbidden shrine to wish back her mother who died to the town's ritual. When you get to the bottom, you find and defeat the underworld queen who holds the same leaf as you, who then says you've made a great mistake, but your mother, who still agrees with the practices while dead, sends you back to the entrance. This girl who vanquished this supposed evil was cursed into becoming one herself and needed to be defeated in turn, but this time was saved. Then the two girls fight once more to purify the Queen of the Undead through their own volition. The secret boss encounter informs you that even Kaho had become aware of the contradictive nature of their world and possibly even their own fate. Sounds super interesting when I say it out loud like that, doesn't it? But it's not portrayed that way, and using Dora as the through line of the story makes her character really compelling. Someone who lost her faith early on, was subjected to its cruelty within and out, but still chose to do good. But she's not the main character past 1, so Then you have 4, which doesn't tell you anything new other than it happened in Karst as well once. And then you have 5, which just makes it the most passive nothing that I think I've ever seen a premise turn into. 2 moon goddesses existed, and one got jealous of the other one and clawed out his eye, which created the humans on Earth, and both were sealed away by entities even stronger than them. But the bad one was seething so hard it just kind of seeped out onto the Earth, and that's why everybody was all evil and icky before. Just imagine the matriarch going, "Aw man, we did all of those sacrifices because we accidentally celebrated both of them, oops." But I mean, I saw its Dark Souls influence, why am I surprised that it's written like this? Also, it's weird how this game just kinda tosses away the good-bad ending that they've been doing for the past 3 games. I mean, 3 did it the best, and as far as I know, there's a secret someone hasn't found yet. I don't care. As for the gameplay, it's hard to call it the best it's ever been, but I do know it's the one I like to fight in the most. As this series went on, it progressively got easier by a simple act of respecting the player's time. 2 let you increase your health. 3 gave you easier modes, 4 let you heal, and 5 continues that with a little more. Momo 4 is a game that gets easier the deeper you go in, while 5 in my opinion stays pretty consistent all the way through. The worst thing any of these games will ever do to you is kill you by something you had no idea you could see coming. Hard, but I now also know the trick. Lunar Attunement made me completely turn around on the stamina system, which I was just kind of okay with, to be honest. Stamina posed a little bit of a problem until I found some tricks to deal with. I think this is the only game where spamming the dash button is actually worth it. You keep your speed up, the invincibility frames have been tweaked a little bit, but they're still kind of there. But the time and speed Lunar Attunement gives you, it basically more than doubles your stamina bar. It turns it from a game of managing your stamina into one of just waiting for it to recharge. Don't even have to wait for it to fill up all the way. It's great. When you beat the game, you unlock extra modes. There's a boss replay challenge in the village that's easy to find. It gives you more lore and helps you reach 111% completion. It's weird that you don't have to do all of them to get that, and it seems to be point based, but hey, whatever, pick one. Normal, nightmare. You're going to at least seem to have to do 2 nightmare ones, so let me just tell you now, they don't modify the boss. They modify the area arena where they fill it with instant death boxes and instant death projectile, or maybe both. It's awful and unfun, which is why it was changed to a box that will put you in a vulnerable state and leave you at 1 HP, and the projectile doing the same thing. There's a hardcore mode with harder enemies in it. Buffed enemies show up more often, and if you die, you lose your save file. I never saw the appeal of modes like that. There's an arrange mode that flips the map and messes with enemy placement as well. You lose the last bit of your 4-hit combo, and that's it. Really? Maybe a fun secret that you don't really get but doesn't really change anything. Personally, I would have liked a New Game Plus, but that just kind of ruins exploration games, so I get why it's not there. But let's wrap this back up with the whole identity issue and my whole bit about it. I'd like to say that with this latest release, that feeling has been dashed. I think for as basic as it is, the storytelling really gives it a mood of its own. The environments are a mix of natural, ancient, and mythical, with a dreadful undertone that seeps through it all with its own personal art style. Music that sets the mood and can get you hyped and dreadful all at the same time. And while I wish the story was more focused on our characters and their personal connections to the ones around them, the one that we have isn't bad. I think I can say confidently that this is the ultimate Momodora experience, being built up by over a decade of hard work and a desire to express one's love for video games. My favorite thing about this series, more so than the gameplay or even the character premise, was watching the evolution of someone's passion, and that's probably one of the highest forms of art I've ever seen. That alone is something to recommend these games on, but if you're an action game fan like me, even if they all express themselves a little differently, I still think it's worth your time to give the series a try. But until we meet again, ciao, until we meet again.